This is John Trek McPhee, the Sheriff of Baghdad. This is the SOB podcast. I'm talking to a actual student of mine, and we're going to talk today about new guy shooting. If you're new to the range, if you just bought a gun, this is the podcast to listen to. I'm here with a friend of mine, Ken. Ken, kind of introduce yourself, tell the guys a little bit about you, and then we'll move on. What do you think?
Yeah, man. Thanks for the introduction. How you guys doing? Ken Stewart. I'm work in the technology world out of California. Was in the Air Force for a few years, firefighter, did search and rescue with those guys. Just been shooting my whole life since I was a kid, and never did it well, but wanted to kind of learn and get better. So in the research, got out and found John.
Yeah, I think that's the common thing. Like, guys that find me are generally smart guys who have gotten, like, you see shootings all over the internet, right? There's guys with guns, there's guys with knives, guns, there's guys with, there's a little everything, right? And you start watching the internet and you want to get better, and you start listening to some of these guys on the internet, but you never get better.
Totally. Yeah, it's, the way that I went about my research was really just, I tried to be pragmatic, right? I thought to myself, like, who are the quiet guys that are really just known to be the best shooters outside of, like, the ego of competition? And just start to research them and see, like, what are they doing, right? I know I'm a student, right? Perpetually a student. And so getting out there and seeing, like, okay, how am I going to learn, right? I mean, I could go sign up at a class where there's 30 guys in there and they're just running around dumping 1,000 rounds a day downrange. Or I can go talk to a guy that is going to spend time with me and really break down the dumb stuff. It's like, I grew up in judo and jujitsu and, watching old school videos of, like, Hodger, right? And he just crushes people with, like, a hip toss, side control, I take your mount and I cross choke you, which is, like, the most basic evolution of moves. And so I'm like, who can I go to that will teach me those foundational things? And I came across your videos, man, and that's what you were doing. Like, look, we can dump 1,000 rounds downrange all day. You're not going to learn shit, right? But if we can scale that down and focus on the minutia, like, the other stuff will come together.
Yeah, well, I agree, man. And I'd say, some of the, in the beginning of the jiu-jitsu kind of culture, you know what I mean? These guys weren't winning with many moves. They would, and there's some guys, you'd watch their videos where they won with the same move every time. They'd hit it from different positions. They'd start it sooner, later, whatever. But it was always the same move, and you're like, that's the move they teach you day one. How is this super advanced guy, winning with this move, right? But the truth is like, I do believe there's kind of foundations, and I also think, like, with the shooting 1,000 rounds, everyone will tell you, you'll hear it on the internet all the time, you're accountable for every time that bullet leaves your barrel. You know what I mean? Like, you've heard this 1,000 times.
Right.
Yeah, we'll go to the range because it's a safe place, and we'll just waste fucking 1,000, 2,000 rounds of ammo when it was like, well, the whole time it was in front of you. Be accountable for every round. If you looked at that for accuracy, right? Like, you would realize we're just wasting fucking ammo. And I'll tell you, dude, like, all my time in the Army and in the unit, like, my buddies would be like, hey, dude, let's, Saturday morning, meet me at the range, bring 500 rounds. I'll be like, okay. And, like, we'd be fucking off for, like, 480, and then we got, like, our last mag, and the dude's like, dude, you want to work on reloads? Fuck no, it's too late. We could have had 480 good reloads right now.
Right.
Like, what the fuck? Like, so I just started to realize, like, guys talked about it, but no one actually brought it past eggshell thin, right? Like, you scratch the surface and, well, we're still going to shoot 1,000 rounds a day instead of, like, if I'm accountable for every round, let's shoot these one at a time.
Right. Well, 100%. And it was like, not to continually make the analogy, but it's like my dad always said in the judo world, like practice doesn't make perfect at all. Fucking perfect practice makes perfect. So if I practice it wrong every fucking time, guess what's going to happen in real life? I'm going to fucking do it wrong.
Yeah, for real. I read one of those psychology books where like musicians, it was talking about how to practice, how people practice. I even forget what book it was, but one of the parts that stuck out to me was, a piano player, right? You're gonna play the piano, and there's a flow to it, there's a rhythm to it, there's like, are we playing hard or soft, right? Any of that stuff. And what stuck out to me was these pianists, right? As these coaches would be coaching little kids, and it's like, why play the third note if you didn't get the first two right?
Right.
So it's like, play the first note right, ding, good job. Now the first two, ding, ding. Instead of trying to practice it all and fucking shit up somewhere in between, you should practice it all as it comes, getting it right. Because what ends up happening is, you're in the middle of the thing and you always have trouble with this part. Well, guess what's going to happen for real? Just out of habit and bad practice. You'll be like fucking sweating bullets when this part comes up because you're going to fuck it up to where, these certain coaches would be like, no, we're going to get it right through there and we're going to practice it one note at a time, right? So by the time you're stringing it all together, you're actually doing the perfect practice. And then I think a lot of guys miss this. And I'll tell you, man, the fucking internet is, and I'll say it, fucking sue me. I don't give a fuck if you like it or not. The internet is the death of expertise. For real.
100%.
For real, right? And it's like, anyone could be an expert. Anyone could make these fucking videos, and I see these guys, they're shooting, making these fucking videos, and it's like, oh, why don't you go fucking join a police department?
Right.
Why don't you go join the army? Oh, well, you're not going to do that because you're really a fucking coward or a pussy. You just make great shooting videos, right? So, I think, having said all of that, the way you practice is going to set you up for success or failure in the long run.
100%. Well, and the other thing too, about the way that you're setting up your classes, I don't know if you remember my first ever class when I flew out to meet you.
West Virginia,
man. Like flew out from Cali, right?
Yeah.
And I knew what I was getting into, and I had specifically been like working on my grip, right? Like literally working on it. And then I get on video with you, and I started laughing. Like, what are you fucking laughing at? And I'm like, dude, everything I thought I was doing has nothing. I'm not fucking doing it. Like, I'm not even close, right? And you laugh. You're like, yeah, I hear that all the time, right? Like,
I'm about to hit play, and you're already like, oh, I already know. And I'm like,
totally.
Wait, I didn't hit play yet, right?
Yeah. And the reality is, man, is like, I think that people aren't doing that foundational work as instructors. One, because people that take the classes, I think generally, they want to do the tactical shit, right? Like, I want to fucking fast reloads. I want to dump a bunch of rounds down range because that's exciting and it's cool, but it doesn't make you any better. And for the instructors, they're like, look, I want people to want to be here and do all this crazy shit as opposed to like, where am I actually going to get better?
Right.
I think that's a big difference, man. And that video doesn't lie. It just, you can't argue the video. And no one else is doing that.
Right. Well, look, when I started the video in fall of 2012.
Wow.
And the comments I got with teaching video classes, this'll never work. And I was taking, in the fall of 2012, I had to set up a website where you could email me your videos. I would coach them and send them back to you. And I got shit all the time like, this'll never work. You can't judge someone shooting if you weren't there. Like, the cops do it all the time. They wear fucking body cameras. It's called evidence. If you didn't know, you know what I mean? And it'll hold up in a court of law. Like, you think your training's going to hold up in a court of law, smart guy? But I started this in 2012, and I just got a ton of shit. And it's really why I started the membership site, because I just closed off because I was tired of getting hate. And at the same time, like look, there's guys, and everybody knows these guys. There's the guy who, like, he's a little bit vain and he's worried about his six pack. He's going to go outside and cut the grass at fucking almost nothing because he needs to get a tan. There's, guys that are kind of like, the chubby kind of fat slob guy. There's guys out there that are fucking dickheads that don't like anybody, right? And then there's guys like me where, like, I've always been the good intent guy. Like, hey, if you need my help and you ask, I'll do whatever I can to help you. If that's give you the shirt off my back, let's do it. And as the good intent guy, as the long time, look, I've never been the fastest runner or the strongest guy but I am pretty fucking good at a lot of shit. And it came from, like, having good intent. Like, let's just figure this out. Excuse me. Let's make the best decision we can right now in the situation we're in, right?
Yeah.
And like, go from there. And being the good intent guy, taking all this hate from all these fucking guys who, taking hate from a guy who has actually shot himself in the foot, like, literally, right? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Who the fuck and like,
right.
It's just crazy to me. So, but the truth is like, I started doing the video. I started working with the Coach's Eye, the guys that make that app I use. And, like, through them, I started proliferating my video coaching style to pro teams, to college teams, and, like, turns out my style of video coaching is probably at the time, one of the most advanced in the country. And, like, I didn't even know it. I'm like, well, this just makes sense to me. Check this out, right? Like, and they're like, who taught you this? Like, you mind if, we get on a call with the Dallas Cowboys, Coach's Eye guys made them their own app. Like, so you can't tell me it doesn't work, because every pro team, hell, the NFL, like them or not these days, right?
Right.
The NFL has been doing video and watching game day footage since fucking TV came on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, ask those guys that play in the NFL, right? Like, dude, probably, I would say 80% of what they fucking do in practice is reviewing video, right?
Right.
This you did. How did you react? Like, this situation came up and you went left. Why did you go left? Right? Like, what was going through your head? Let's talk about it. But the reality is, I think, the technology component's fantastic. But also, I think you probably are going to get a different kind of student. You're going to get students that are like, look, I'm going to shut up and I just want to learn, right? Because I have faith that, like, when you show me a video, because if you didn't have a video, you could just say, hey, you did this or you did that. And I could be like, I don't think I did that, right? Like, and I'm just thinking to myself, but you could be like, no, dude, like, here's the video. That's what you did. And let's talk about it. And if I think you're going to get those students that are like, man, like, I just want to shut up and learn. And the evidence is what the evidence is. Point, right? Like, fucking camera footage, dude. You can't deny it.
Right.
And so all that works. But, and it's funny because, you're in the process, right? I mean, not only is the video footage, really pioneering, but also, like, debunking some of the stupid myths out there about trigger jerk. I remember laughing my ass off in that first class, and then even more I laughed harder in the second and third class, right? I'm like, oh, here we go. This is great. And I kind of, like, watch and see how people react, because the science doesn't support that trigger jerk is going to do anything, right? Outside of, like, what the rest of your grip and stance is helping you do. It's just funny. It's just funny. But of course people are precious about it because they've got it beat into their head for their entire life. And so telling people what you've learned for 20 years or 30 or 50 years, people are going to have a reaction to that, right?
Yeah, well, I think the trigger jerk myth, that first video, like, I think it's still circulating. I think it's over, like, 3 to 3.5 million views on trigger jerk is bullshit, right? And like, one of the things that gave it so many views is fucking guys arguing over it. You know what I mean? And I think, look, trigger jerk, it's maybe 10% of separate conversations, right? Part of the trigger jerk is the gun is aimed low. What aims the gun low? You know what I mean? Part of the trigger jerk is it goes left. What gets the gun to go left, right? And those are just the top two off the top of my head. And then, if your trigger finger is moving the gun underneath your hand, it's not sympathetic finger fucking pulling, jerking. It's, you know what I mean? It's your fucking, if the trigger pull is 5 pounds, how is that overpowering the firing hand gripping the gun? If the firing hand gripping the gun is tighter than 5 pounds, then the trigger shouldn't matter. But the trigger jerk conversation is a dead end road because it's 10% of probably 3 or 4 other conversations. And here I come along saying, hey, let's expand the conversation on this. And, well, I'm an NRA instructor. Oh, great. You paid $60 to those fucking guys over a weekend like I fucking did. You got your fucking card, which means nothing because fucking, I did my NRA rifle, pistol, shotgun in a fucking weekend.
Right.
And because I was from the unit, I didn't have to shoot it all. The dude's like, nah, you ain't even got to shoot. I know how you do. Okay. I'll do whatever you tell me, but having said that, the golden standard, the NRA instructor, here I am coming along and I'm trying to expand the conversation going, hey, it's bullshit because of these reasons. Some of it's here, some of it's here. And as you dissect those conversations, right, you end up getting truer information. And I think this is the problem with the internet and living in the internet day and age is you could make a generic statement that might encompass 3 different things. And, so you make this generic statement, it combines all this shit and you say, let's fuck up. Right. But you're like, hold on, let's break this down. Right? Hey, we do have to have a certain amount of stance to be able to shoot, move well, right? Yep. We do have a certain amount of grip to hold the gun steady, right? As you break those conversations down, what you'll realize is, I gave you this generic term that is only a small fraction of the truth. And I don't think anyone has bad intent. I just think if you hear it for long enough, totally, over time, it's got to be true.
Right. Yeah, and there isn't enough people out there speaking about it and, in other ways, right? Like, there's very few people, I don't know of anybody but you, that is out there talking about that, right? Or even dissecting that chart. Like, what the fuck is that thing called? Like,
pie chart.
Yeah. The funniest thing is, man, I've literally been shooting, like, a lot of your listeners, like, the first time I shot was in, like, 6th grade. My dad handed me a G17, and I'm, like, 90 fucking pounds soaking wet, and I hated like, grabbing a brick, right? And so I had never seen the pie chart, even since then. And then a couple of years ago, I became an RSO at my local gun range in California. And all of a sudden, I started seeing the pie chart, even at the gun range, and I've been going everywhere. And now I start seeing it everywhere, and I just walk by and laugh, right? Like, I'm not even going to have a conversation with the range folks. It's not even worth, like, the battle, because they're like these old curmudgeons that are 200 years old, and, they've been at the range forever, and you can't teach them shit, right? Because I've been doing it this way my whole life, and that's fucking the way it is. But it doesn't make any sense, dude. Like, when you break it down, it's the funniest thing. Like, when you take a step back and don't just accept something, but then you take a critical eye and go, okay, like, let's break it down. Like, why would this do this? It doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
And so
it's eggshell thin. It's eggshell thin.
Yeah, 100%. You know what's funny, too, is now, and I don't get into it because I hate the internet trolls and, like, I don't want to get into fights with people online. You just see shit now, like, where people say things and you're like, come on, dude, like, look a little further than what you're trying to run, man. Like, just try to be discerning when you look. And like you said, the internet, man, because anyone can fucking Google anything. And the most popular response comes up, and so that's what they buy into is gospel.
Right.
And it just, it sucks. It sucks, but it's the way of the world today, right? But I saw someone post the other day, like, stance is not foundational to good shooting.
I've seen that too.
And I was like, really? Like, look, like you said, it's all part of a puzzle, right? And if you're doing everything at 99% and one component's off a little bit, you could probably compensate for that, right?
Yeah.
But if you're doing all of it at 70% because you're a relatively new shooter like myself in a proficient way, then that, if you don't do the stance, if you're not standing properly, then it's going to make a huge impact because none of it is done at a really high level, right? So, I mean, that's my perspective. I just laughed when I saw it and I was like, that doesn't make it.
Yeah, I mean, look, you could do whatever you want. You know what I mean? Like most guys could, right? But when I seen the stance is not a foundation of shooting, I would go, okay, what do you consider the fundamentals of marksmanship, right? And it's like trigger squeeze, fucking breathing's in there. Like, okay, so of all the things that people call a fucking fundamental of marksmanship, you're going to call out stance, but not breathing? Because, like, I would say this, breathing is a fundamental of life. And breathing is complete bullshit because you're never going to fucking stop unless you want to fucking die, and then, well, that's on you, right? This is America. Stop fucking breathing. I don't care. But I would think of the fundamentals of marksmanship, right? Like, trigger squeeze, follow through, right? Like, you're going to fucking say stance is the bullshit.
Right.
Like, I would say I would attack breathing first.
100%, man. Absolutely. Yep.
But there's in today's day and age, there's so many videos out there, and the videos are just for views, right? That you can't get a sense of what you're supposed to be doing or what is actually good or not. You can't these days, right? Especially if you're on the internet. And I feel like, guys do shit for views, and I also feel like in the doing shit for views, I think that the average, civilian in the United States, the average cop in the United States, the average military guy, or the average Delta Force guy are going to be in different situations. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Right? And the average concealed carry holder in the United States, right? Like, a police officer might have to shoot at 25 yards. A concealed carry holder in the United States, I would highly advise against it. Yeah, especially if you suck in an urban area. Just saying, right? Because you got enough distance where
the vast majority do. Let's just be honest.
Yeah, and I would say at that distance, as a concealed carry holder, go away, go somewhere else. Like, probably shooting is the very last. I don't know. Could it happen? Yes. I'm not going to say it can't happen, but I would say the 90% probably don't do it. Where a cop might have to do it, or a military guy might even. This is not an option, right? So, having said that, I think a lot of guys, the internet always shows these 1% situations. The shoot and stab and the slashing with the knife, right? Like, seriously, right? And then I've done I just did a podcast about knife fighting and guns, right? And, the guy who trains the unit, his motto is use the steel to get to the lead.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And he also says, like, if you're going to bring a knife, finish a fight, carry a samurai sword. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just saying, right? So, I've talked about this before, but the internet loves to show these 1% niche situations, and then this is all guys are training on, where the 90% of it, the fucking good marksmanship piece, just being solid, pulling out the gun, drawing in a decent time, like, guys aren't doing the 90%. They do the 1% because this is what the internet shows all the time. And if you had the 90% down, how hard would this 1% situation be? Well, yeah, I'm doing something a little different, but, okay. And then as a unit guy, we train the 90% daily. Like, this is our 90%. This is our bread and butter. What if this happens?
Right.
Well, we got to figure that out at that time. But because I'm good at all these other things, this won't be as bad. But if I only train this, I would suck in so many other areas.
Totally. It's no different than, it's so applicable to so many different things in life, but people, I think, struggle to put it into like the practical components of like shooting or other things. It's like, I've got some friends that run a really fantastic underground Nogi school in Salt Lake City, right? Pat, who you met in Salt Lake.
Yeah, yeah.
That dude is a legit badass grappler. And you'd never guess it by looking at him. He will choke the fucking life out of like the vast majority of people walking around. And when you go to a school, like man, people will show up and be like, man, I want to fucking learn the Barambola. And he's like, dude, you can't fucking do an RNC. Like 90% of the world on a mat, you're never going to get into a Barambola situation. So leave that shit alone. Or even in the corporate world where I live, you know, day in and day out, it's like teaching your team to say, look, a non-decision is worse than a bad decision. So let's get 80% plan develop, and then let's go. And the 20%, dude, those are the variables of fucking life, right? Like, and we'll figure those out because we're smart and we're educated and we have the skill set to navigate that balance. But if I sit around and try to build a plan to 100%, dude, we'll never execute. We'll never move forward. So let's rock and roll, man. So
I tell guys who are perfectionists all the time, done is better than perfect.
Right.
Because if you're waiting on perfect, we're going to be waiting a long time.
Yeah, we're going to miss the mark, right? Like the situation will have moved on without us. So, I mean, it just makes total sense. But I think people struggle with that because that 1% niche shit is the cool stuff that people are like, oh man, there's a guy running at me from 3 feet and, you know, he's going to do this and he's going to do that. Or, you know, the other thing to it is, you know, is just being smart about when to pull a weapon and when not. If you're in a concealed carry situation, the best, and someone's at 25 yards, like, do you really need to pull your weapon at that point? Some situations, yes, right? But a lot of situations, no. And like you said, thinking through, look, if I pull my weapon, that's a death sentence. What's happening right now, a death sentence for this guy? Or because I am just a typical Joe Blow with a concealed carry, what about my backdrop, right? Where am I putting things when I end up missing fucking 3 out of my 5 rounds, right? Or 4 out of 5. And the reality is, man, I forget where it is, so someone's going to call me out on this, I'm sure, but there was a couple years ago, I think it was in California, there was a car chase, and some cops got into a shootout with this guy in an Explorer. There was 3 cop cars from 10 to 15 feet, they all came up, surrounded him. They dumped 117 rounds into this Explorer and hit him 3 times. And you're like, all right, guys, really? Really, we can be a lot better and smarter, right?
Agree.
And not put people in danger that don't need to be.
Yeah, remember the Times Square shooter was the same thing. Over 100 rounds shot at him in Times Square. He lived, 9 innocent bystanders stopped.
Right. Not okay.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes to being able to train at that 90%. And I'll tell you I feel like everybody, and look, if you've been a professional at anything you do, right, you realize the hard work it took to get there. But if you've never been truly a professional at high level at anything, I think you think that there's a little bit of magic, give me this hot tip, right? Give me this. And the truth is you want to be good, you got to put in the work, right? And that could be a lot of fucking work. Now, right? If you start in my classes, look, I could teach you all kinds of shit, but 6 months from now, what the fuck are you going to retain and be able to do? And the truth is, that's why my shit's so fucking simple. Because it's I want something to stick with you for months, years, to where, you start coming to classes once a year with me, you're not backsliding. And I'd also say this is why I don't do shoot-offs anymore in my classes. Because if you show up to a class, having been to a few, and there's a new guy out there, you're going to be looking at this guy dang, look at his target down there. This guy's fucking hot shit. And the truth is well, you actually started as the new guy. You've just been progressing the whole time. And it wouldn't be fair to the new guy to do a shoot-off because he's trying to get dialed in for the first time. So I think people are always looking for this magic, like like in the movies, like, I'm gonna tap you on the head with a wand, and all of a sudden you're gonna be Prince fucking Charming, like it don't happen like that in the real world. So, in especially in my classes, is I'm trying to just give you those one or two things you could walk away with, to where now there's, from this point, seeing it for what it really is, there's no backsliding. Like, if you just put in some work,
Right.
you would constantly be getting better.
Right. Well, and you know what's interesting is, I mean, when I walked away from your first class, every time I shoot now, I literally draw my index on my hand, right? Like, legit draw it on my hand. I show it to the range, I get squared away, I draw it, because now I can do that, right? I can think about that component. The other thing is, I go out shooting with friends, and it's funny, they're like, dude, aren't we going to shoot more? And I'm like, no, I'll go up, like, what are we working on today, guys? Like, specifically, are we going to work on this or that? Like, I'm not here. Yes, we could show up with 1,000 rounds in the middle of the desert, right? And just, like I said, do nothing. Or we can be here to learn, and, I can spend the money on fucking beer later as opposed to just wasting money on ammo,
For real. I'd rather spend money on booze,
Yeah, exactly. So, that part, I think, is hugely important to say, look, how can I break this down into incremental steps so I can get, like you said in the classes, 1% better today, right? And not to belabor the social world today, but people who want that magic touch, it's the instant gratification of our world today, where people are like, just tell me and I'll do it, and now I'll be a fucking unit guy, right? Like, no, dude, that's not the case.
I agree. I totally agree. I think everyone, and like this happens in dojos all the time. The guy comes in and he's like, well, teach me this move. And you're like, well, could you do these other moves? Because if you can't do these, there's no reason for me to teach you this.
Right.
You know what I mean? Now, having said that, right, is I have to, people say to me all the time, like, man, I bet if you got a new shooter, like, they wouldn't have any bad habits. Well, that's absolutely not true. Your brain, in your brain, like it or not, you're cognitively biased. Your brain has all kinds of biases. So you already have these thinking what I should or shouldn't be doing and how this works, right? But having said that, is I have to show you a few things and you have to pick them up. Now I start to tweak those things and we can move on to something else. And then we're still tweaking the first stuff, but the first stuff's starting to get better and better. And I can teach you another thing, and then we start to tweak those. And then before you know it, the stuff we started on, well, you don't got to worry about that anymore, because I have done that so many times perfectly that I'm just going to get it perfect.
Right.
And then I can constantly tweak. So the not having any bad habits, not as true as you think, right? Like, you could have no bad habits. I can show you how to do an armbar in jiu-jitsu today. It doesn't mean tomorrow you're going to have the perfect armbar.
Totally.
It takes time to hone that, when do I start to get this? Where do I need to be? Where do my hips need to be, right? Like, it takes time to hone that. So I would tell anybody is it good to come to me first? Yeah, because I can set you on an easier and simpler path to get better. However, you're still going to have some type of preconceived notions because you've watched TV. You know what I mean? Like, you've seen Rambo shoot the machine gun with no shirt, and you're like, that's how you do it, right? And then, like, once you know how to shoot, you're like, oh, Rambo, you're gonna burn your nipples, dog. Like, you don't want brass hitting your nipples.
Well, I was gonna ask you, dude, on the next class, are we gonna do like a John Wick mag change to fly an armbar? Like, is that?
Yes.
That's in the 3-day class.
We are. Yeah. Yeah, that's a 3-day class. I don't have time in the 2-day, but 3 days we'd have enough time for real.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, and so even past like the cognitive bias that people have, like there's physical limitations, right? Like,
oh, for sure.
We had a guy like, oh, my thumb won't come around the grip, so I grip it like this on my carbine, right? And then at the end of the class, he was gripping it the right way, right?
Right.
You had him get it because you figured it out with, and it was funny. Like, I still struggle with stance and just leaning forward. It feels so simple, right? Like logistically it's simple, just mid-stride, right? But I still want to get to like the statement you hate, which I'm just going to use it for layman's terms, like the athletic stance, right? Like, hey, Ken, well, what if I'm a fucking swimmer? My athletic stance is laying down, right?
Yeah.
But like, it's still like I have to work through it. And I've spent, days and days with you. But I know that I have that bias because for me, and Pat and I were talking about this in Salt Lake. He's like, dude, I played football, wrestling, and jiu-jitsu my whole life. Like, if I'm going to do something that I'm grabbing or doing something physical with, I get a low stance because that's how my mind works, right? And so breaking, like you said, that cognitive bias of like, I'm used to doing this every time. You got
right.
But it just takes time. You just got to do it every single time.
Yeah, I think the, with the cognitive biases and, is I think a lot of, look, psychology-wise, the biggest limiting factor to everything we do is the language between each other, right? I think like ancient Greek, which Greek was the first language the Bible was written in, right?
Yep.
There was like 13 different terms for the color blue.
Yeah.
Right? But, look around the room you're in, like I see about 10 different shades, 5 different shades of blue right now, right? So, if I told you, hey, grab the blue one, and there's 13 different blue ones there, you'd be like, and then, but then you would go and be like, hey, you just grab the blue one. And guys like, oh yeah, just grab the blue one. And they get there like, there's a lot of blue ones here, right?
Right.
So a lot of time, language is the limiting factor in training people or getting people to do anything. However, right, this is why I don't like that term athletic stance, because it's not descriptive enough to tell you right now where each piece of your body is. So I try to be more specific than that. But this is that, the, hey, kind of do it this way, kind of help a guy, when it's like, well, let's take a step back and let's explain to this guy where each piece needs to be. And of course he'd be able to perform better. Some of it he might be screwing up, and this is where, like I tell guys all the time, right, is if I find 10 things wrong, 7 we could fix right now. Just good communication, right? And you're like, yeah, you see it on the video, you're like, I don't even know why I was doing that. I can easily never do that again. And then 3 are like, oh, like I did it again. Like, okay, just don't mess up this one thing. Okay, ready? Go. All right, I already messed it up. You're like, whoa. So, but a lot of that has to do with just language and how we talk to each other, right? And that's why I always try to be as specific to an individual as possible, because you're right. What I tell you may not work for the guy who has an injury that can't wrap his thumb around it. It may not work on the guy who had knee surgery and he's really got to keep the weight on one knee, right?
Yeah.
And this is where specifically I talk to them. But, it's the language piece that's the huge limiting factor in the gun world, right? Because when you're cool, you're using big words, right? Oh, bro, this is dynamic. Dude, man, bro, you got to do the dynamic. Like, I was hearing guys telling me I was doing dynamic shit. I never even heard dynamic anything. My whole time as a commando, I'm like, oh, they're like, oh, dog, you do that dynamic entry? Like, no, we kind of just like run through the door.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, that's dynamic entry, right? And I'm like, no, it isn't. You would go through a door anyway. We do the same thing, right? And so, but guys are putting these big words in to sound cool, but really it's muddying the water of actual communication.
Right. Yeah, 100%, man. You know what I keep waiting to see when I show up to one of your classes is a dude to show up with just decked out in tactical shit, right? Like fucking vest on and, just like a Kevlar helmet or something. Just like, is this dude for real? Like, did he really show up this way? Like, I keep waiting for that. Does that ever happen where people show up and you're like...
So, hey, in 2012, 2013, when I first started doing the videos, I transitioned from the 2,000 rounds over a weekend, or 1,000 rounds over a weekend to, maybe 100 and some a day, When I transitioned to that, I was still getting the guys wearing full kit, all their guns, and it's like, I'd be like, dude, it's a video class, like, you got to like, is it your job? You always trying to train in your gear or something. What do you do? Oh yeah, I'm like a pharmacist. Like,
I'm a dentist.
Yeah, like okay, ditch the helmet, body armor, and put on a white coat, and that would be more realistic for you, right? Like, I don't really get those guys anymore, and I'll tell you why. Because guys see me doing the video, and if a guy thinks highly of himself, he has ego. He don't want to be judged off the video, and that keeps a lot of guys at bay away from me. And there's been a few guys come out that couldn't handle they couldn't handle the, hey, do this, do that, rotate this hand, do these things, right? Where most people are like, okay, and then by the end of the day, everybody's shooting in the 3-inch circle. This guy he'll be shooting whatever he is, and he just can't see that he actually isn't getting better, and everyone around him has rapidly advanced. He thinks so highly of himself, he can't see that. And then normally, there's been a couple times where I'll get a guy like that, and then I'll do the shoot off at the end of the day, and we'll do like a walk back, and like, it'll be the guy with the $4,000 Glock. His ego is bigger than him, and he gets beat by some dude with like a rusty SIG that his dad gave him. You know what I mean? And it's like, and then there'll be a point where I'll have to tell him, and I only get this like once a year or so. I'll have to tell him, like, look, if what you're doing is so good, how did the guy, the rusty SIG out of the sock drawer, who it's his first class, how did that guy just beat you?
Yeah.
And that's normally when the guy's like, fuck, because he knows he's got a $4,000 Glock. He knows he's got all the gear. He's got all the, right? Because that is generally the answer. Better gear, right? You're going to get better. But the truth is that ain't true.
No, it ain't the tool. It's the craftsman behind the tool, right?
Right. It's never the arrow. It's the Indian.
That's 100%, man. 100%. So it's interesting, right, that you've evolved in the way that you teach so much. I mean, for a guy that was in the unit and then sergeant major in, SF, right, you taught for years and years, or were over some of that, learning, and then to fine tune it as much after the fact. Like, what's a catalyst for you to continue to evolve how you instruct?
Man, I'll tell you, I started to learn that, like, we sucked at a lot of shit. We're out there teaching fucking, we're out there teaching every day. We're out there shooting every day. But, like, for me, it was, man, when I finished OTC, I was probably a C-class IPSC shooter. I got to the point where most of my career I was an A-class IPSC shooter, and I just couldn't cross into master class, right? And it was the kind of plateau effect.
Yeah.
The more I shot, the harder I tried, the more I did, the worse I got, the more I plateaued and never got better. And then when I started messing with the Coach's Eye app, and I realized nothing I was ever told, no advice I ever gave was really true off the video. What the fuck am I seeing here, and how do I actually explain this to somebody?
Right.
When I realized there's more to this conversation, and most of what I was trained, or most of the way we talk to each other to train, was generic information, or, train the trainer, grapevine information. With the grapevine, it's going to come back hookers and blow, no matter what the fuck no matter what you started with, it's going to come back as hookers and blows. So the grapevine is actually train the trainer, and it gets worse every time you train the trainer, right? So I realized that, we are not speaking specifically enough to each other. Language was our big barrier. And then as I took a step back and started to fix myself on all these little things, that I tell everyone to do in a class. What happened over time is, first IPSC match I go do, I shoot master class easily for the first time in my life. And then I got to the point where if I'd have a good day, I'd be closer to grandmaster times in that. Now, I don't pay to be in IPSC. I just kind of go to matches and I got to compare my scores to other guys, right? But for the first time, when I backed off and slowly started to fix all these little things, I started to get better with less rounds.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because, and I think this is human nature, is the more you do something, the more reps you get, the more this is a slippery slope. And this is what puts people on the top of the food chain, is cutting corners. It's what keeps us on the top of the food chain, right? But the reality is you start cutting corners when you want to get good at something. And now you're on that slippery slope downhill where you're starting to make mistakes. But since you rounded that corner, every time you round that corner, that rounding gets a little bit bigger because rounding the corner is okay. Right. And then next thing you know, you round that corner so much, you're like, fuck am I doing? How did I get in the middle of the room? I was just rounding the corner a little bit. Like, dude, you're 6 feet away from the fucking wall, right? So, it's that, the more you do, the harder you push, the more it's that slippery slope downward. And I think that's human nature at everything you do. You know what I mean? And I think in today's day and age, people are not allowed, right? Like, I don't know, 100 years ago, there'd be, if your dad was a bricklayer, you're going to be a master bricklayer. Why? Because you started laying bricks at 4 and seeing bricks and seeing the technique and seeing how it's done. And then, and then you were an apprentice. And then look at the Templars. You were an apprentice for a knight for 10 years. Weapon selection, gear he wore in the battle, right? Like, and then all of a sudden now you're in training yourself. But it's not like, you just started this. Today's day and age, like, look, the average person thinks buying 100 rounds a year is a lot of bullets. You know what I mean? And to be a master level, even if I told you, hey, shoot 1 round a day, think about if you shot 1 perfect round a day, that would be 365 a year, right? That's still more than the person thinking 100 rounds or 2 boxes of shells. That's a lot of ammo. That's what my family tells me. How many boxes of shells you got, John? Like, 2. And I don't tell them, like, they're cases. But right. I don't tell them, like, they're like, whoa, you got, my aunt calls me Johnny. She's like, Johnny, you got 2 boxes of shells in your truck? Don't you think that's a little much? Like, no, I don't. Right? Like, yeah. I didn't tell her those 2 boxes. 1 box has 2,000 rounds of 9mm, and the other one's 1,000 5.56 at all times, right? But I didn't tell her that. But people think like, the book Mastery, right? The guy wrote you needed 10,000 hours of a top to get better. The truth is that isn't true. And he came back and rewrote a paper how he was fucking wrong in the book Mastery. And that paper said, if you were doing it perfectly that whole time, you wouldn't need 10,000 hours. Right. However, if you fucked up a lot and learned from your mistakes and I'd also say this is like, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, right? And we talk about Jiu-Jitsu all the time. Gracie Online University. If you've ever read, it'll take you, if you do the online university, it says in there, it'll take you up to 14 years to become a black belt.
Right.
Right? But this is online. Well, think about this. What if you went to a black belt every day?
Right.
You know what I mean? And then look, in my day, right? Like, when I started doing jiu-jitsu, the dudes that were teaching in the dojos downtown were just new blue belts, and I already had a second stripe.
Yeah.
So it's like, how did I nowadays I could have been hitting a black belt. I'd have been a black belt by now. Back in the day, like, and then I'd go to dojos and I'd show up and be the blue belt, and they're like, "Oh, you're the instructor?" Like, right. No, I just came to roll open mat night, right? Like, I just want to choke someone out. I don't want to teach anybody, and I get stuck teaching. And then it got to a point where there was a couple purple belts around, like, holy shit, that guy's a purple,
Yep.
To where nowadays, like, dude, I got buddies that are with black belts every day. Think about how, what do you think it would take you to get a black belt if you rolled every day with a black belt? And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do with the classes, and that is, give you that black belt information, because, all you're getting off the internet is all that white and blue belt shit.
Exactly. Well, and the funny thing is, to even go further on that note, like, I'd rather be a John McPhee fucking Sheriff of Baghdad blue belt shooter than, internet savage fucking YouTuber black belt, right? That's never actually been down the road, because you see that these days, right? Where people are now a black belt today, could be different than it was a few years ago, right? Now the game has evolved and all that kind of stuff, but there's a lot of people out there that just get the time and service black belt, right?
Right.
It's diluted to, further to that point, right? Like, look, I could go train with you and a couple guys that you respect, and you're like, man, that fucking dude is dialed in. Like, take one of his classes, or whatever. Yeah. And yeah, like, I'm a John McPhee fucking blue belt. I may go into your class and your shooter level is a purple or a brown or a black, but I'm like, yeah, I'm a blue belt, and I might outshoot you, or I might choke the shit out of you. But that's just life. I mean, I trained all over with Pat in Salt Lake, and, I was under Health Racing, California, and, I wear a purple belt, and I go to academies all over the world as a purple, and I'll give the black belts a run for their money, right? I mean, just because of the level of instruction where, I'm not going to hit this stupid fancy shit, right? Like, right. But foundationally, I'm going to do a good job, where, same with you, like, I'd rather focus on those fundamentals and then have them go, man, your draw stroke is slow. Yeah, it might be slow, but as soon as I hit that extension, bang, like we talked about the other day when we were doing the video training, right? Like, you don't have to be the fastest runner, but if I can beat you by a tenth or a third of a second in each of those evolutions, now I beat you by 3 seconds, right?
Right.
And that's where I want to be. Like, right. I'm not I'd love to be the best at everything, but I'm just looking to be better than I was in every single component, which will then aggregate into much better in an overall shooting situation.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I used to call that building the core. Is, if you're a really good skydiver, and you're really good at jujitsu, and you're really good wrestler, and you're a really good shooter, and I may not be the best, you know what I mean? And all these things, I try to be like top 5 of guys in all these things. Well, before you know it, like, you're fucking hard to beat. Not only are you hard to beat, but I'm confident. I'm going to run my race. I'm going to do my thing. I know my strengths, right? I know my confidence. I know the things where I'm going to cheat this a touch for speed, but these things, like, I'm right. Focused here, right? As you start to, across the board, start to build that competency of a core of a human being, you'll find it's better to be good at a lot of stuff than fucking great and shitty, And it's really the law of averages. Like, a lot of times we used to do these multi-event shooting, run, ruck, right? Okay, yeah, there's going to be a guy, he beats me on the run. Great, right? Okay, well, what if I came in top 10 on the run, but I came in 3rd in the shooting, I came in 2nd in this, I come in, right? You average all that out, and now I'm top 3 to right. Where, well, you beat me on the run, right? But you tanked in few things, you're in 30th place, right? So it's really the law of averages, and the more you can average out to be pretty good at a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of the events that I would win, like, I was top 3 to 5 in all the events. If you won one and came in 10th, you're now 5th. What if I took 2 thirds?
Right.
So, right. It's just about, there's no perfect. It's varying levels of better. But at the same time, you're pretty good at each. You know what I mean? That core is going to be better. We've had guys come out to the unit back in the jiu-jitsu days. I'm not going to name any names, but he does hand-to-hand and shooting all over the fucking internet right now. And he came out thinking he was going to teach us a thing in hand-to-hand, right? And, like, fucking white belts were handling this motherfucker. You know what I mean? Like, seriously, right? So, I've seen, I'd rather be the unit dojo white belt, you know what I'm saying? Than like the white belt from fucking who knows where academy.
Yeah, exactly. 100%, man. 100%. It's interesting. The other thing I was going to ask you was I found it, and I appreciate it, but it's funny, I see it come up in your classes. Each one of your classes I've been to, someone asks, hey, will you shoot for us? Like, will you show us what it's supposed to look like? And I think the response is fantastic, which is like, why do you need to see me shoot? Right? Like, the way I shoot has nothing to do with you. Like, we're here for me to teach you fundamentals and then look at video, and I'm gonna show you specifically what you need to work on. Like, don't clutter your mind with what John does, right?
Right.
Think about what Ken does and what does Ken need to do differently.
Right. Yeah. You know? No, I get it. Look, I used to do, before the video, I'd show up at the class. We're going to do a drill. I'm going to burn all you guys down to put you into place. Basically, I just pissed all over your legs to mark my territory.
Yeah,
right? Yeah, and then like everyone's like, well, dang, right? And then the problem with that was what I was finding is I was mentally turning guys off. And, what the brain does good is rationalization. Well, he's a lifetime. So he's on the range every day. Of course, I can't do that, right? And I shut guys off before there was even time to learn. And then, what I tell guys these days is, okay, let's just say the New England Patriots, Bill Belichick, more Super Bowl rings in the past few years than any other team in history. Yo, you see Bill's old ass out there shagging the ball down to the fucking, like, no. Bill's going to get out there. I'll do this shit myself and take it to the 1 yard line, right? Like, fuck no, he's the coach. He is talking to everybody to get the performance they need. Hey, and then, as a coach, some guys need the tough talk. Hey, you're fucking this up. What the fuck is going on? And right. Some guys, they need the, hey, you got this. You know what I mean? Like, you've been owning this guy. Like, go for it. So, this coaching is, look, everyone in the gun industry, they're now coaches after COVID, which drives me fucking crazy, right? Which I've been saying as a coach the whole time. But training, in my eyes, right, this is what we consider training in the unit is, hey, you're on a team of 5 guys, right? And it's like, hey, you got to do the yearly sexual harassment, Army seminar for sexual harassment. Like, well, it's just the 5 of us. Who the fuck are we going to harass? But we have to do this. You have to do your sexual, and we go to that, and that is training, right? Because no one cares when you leave that you really know this, because it's not going to save your life one day. Right. To where when we were talking to each other and we were self-coaching the whole time, and that's why I think training is shit that isn't going to save your life, and coaching is shit that is going to save your life. And coaching, I need to know that you understand, and I need to know that you could perform, right? Because this is the best situation for you. So guys always want me to shoot in class. And the truth is like, it's kind of irrelevant to your getting better, because the video, the cruelest joke I could play on a guy is comparing him to him on the video, right? Because you see yourself on the video. Yeah. Sky's the limit. You're like, fuck. That up, I like this up. So you see yourself, the sky's the limit. You compare yourself to someone else, right? The brain does it what it does best, is the rationalization of, I'm probably never going to do that. You know what I mean?
Well, and it's interesting too. Like, yeah, I'd love to see you shoot, right? It's always good to watch Tom Brady throw a fucking beautiful pass, right? Like, insert amazing athlete X, right?
Right. Yeah,
cool to see the best do what they do, right? Because that's what you aspire to be when you're working hard, is to be really fucking good at it, right? But at the same time, look, I expect you to be fucking great at what you're shooting. So when I show up to your class to see, and then you shoot, like, I wouldn't be, honestly, like, I would just look at it and go, well, yeah, that's kind of what I would have expected him to do, right? It looks fucking
right.
And they're in the circle like they should be. Like, now let's move on so I can learn how to get better myself, is how I would look at it, right? Like,
yeah.
You wouldn't have done anything that I didn't expect you to do. It looked fucking great, and it was fast and efficient and accurate. Like, fucking moving on,
Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you, the classes where I've actually like shot to show someone something. It's always the oh behind me because they're like, dang, my
Yeah.
timing's good, everything I'm telling you guys, like I work on myself, right? That's how I know to even tell you. But like the times where I've like pulled out a gun and actually shot or something, it's
Yeah.
always like behind me. I always hear like, oh, you just do that, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like the Seth Curry, on the basketball court, right? Like hitting some half-court shot.
Yeah, yeah, just for warm up, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it happens. Yeah,
That's funny.
yeah.
All right, so hey, if someone was gonna come to a class, a new shooter, let's just say they bought a gun today or whatever, had guns forever, doesn't matter. What would you tell them about coming to a class? What would your advice?
Man, I would say a couple things, right? I would say the first thing is check your ego at the door, quote unquote. Just show up with an open mind, like whatever happens today, whatever I hear, I'm just going to absorb it because it may be contrary to things I've heard previously. The other thing is, I was surprised, probably 40 to 50% of your class is kind of classroom, right? Like, is the video diagnostic stuff. Just know that, and be open to the fact, man, we're going to be sitting having a conversation for, a while and talk and look into the video diagnostics. And also, when you go through it, and I really appreciated this, and I don't know that others did, but I appreciate it, which is when other videos are up, wait till the end of their videos and also ask questions, right? Because although you may see something in mine and talk to me about it, when I see you talk to somebody else, I may hear something and I may hear it differently in the way in which you talk to someone else. So just pay attention throughout, all of those.
Yeah, I would agree. You're definitely going to hear stuff you haven't heard before. The conversations, we're trying to talk through it all, which is the conversation you haven't heard yet, because you're still, you're hearing the trigger jerk and pie shark bullshit, which you're like, okay, I got the trigger jerk. What do I do? Oh, don't jerk the trigger, right? What if that wasn't the problem to begin with, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You're going to hear that. And I tell guys all the time, the more videos you watch, right? The more videos you watch, the more you're going to walk away with, you know what I mean? For real. That's all for real.
Right. And I would say too, 100%, but don't feel, I hope someone listens to this, because I think your name and your, experience can potentially be intimidating for people. They're like, man, this fucking commando, sheriff of fucking Baghdad, killer, I'm gonna go learn from him and I don't know anything, right? Why would I go learn from that guy? No, man, I've seen you instruct super green people, and just your approach, not to blow sunshine up your skirt, but really just, I think, welcoming, and there's no ego on your end. No one gets called out or anything. And so just don't be afraid to be man, I can go learn from someone with that experience level. Fuck yeah, man. Don't be intimidated by it at all.
Right.
Which I think a lot of people may be that way. I was, and I don't get intimidated by shit. Things don't fucking scare me, right? I'm kind of one of those guys oh, fuck it. Let's roll the dice, man.
Yeah, let's do it.
I flew across the country to take a class from you. I don't know if you remember, but I didn't even introduce myself. I showed up quiet. I was in the back corner, just putting my stuff together. You were kind of looking at me funny, and then all right, shoot. And I was like, man, what a pussy. You didn't even go up and introduce yourself to this fucking guy, right? But I was I'm a quiet guy when I don't know people. And,
yeah, me too.
I just I hang back and I just observe. So don't be like Ken.
Yeah. No, I think that's look, that's one of the things I absolutely despise about the gun industry is, someone, because you're new, you're going to break some unwritten, rule, right? That you don't know about because you're new. And then you're going to get yelled at, and there's going to be, they're going to cuss at you, and and then you're never going to come back to a gun range again, especially that range. And and this completely bothers me, and look, you've seen this on the range where like people are pointing guns in funny places, and I'm like, okay, let's not do that. Like, put this in, do this before anything else happens. And most of the time, they're like, okay, like, because they don't know, right? The new shooter doesn't know. So I despise when, look, the Second Amendment, it's going to go away one day. That's for real. That's real talk. Like it or not, yeah. I don't care what your argument is. If you're going to kill every federal agent, it's fucking going away. The way we not let it go away is we need more people. Everyone should own a gun. We should be helping our neighbors, right? So that kind of despises me. And I would tell guys, like, yeah, I'm not going to yell. Like, you might point a gun at me. I'm not going to freak out. Like, yeah, you may not want to do that here, right?
Yeah.
But that's how people learn best, right? And that's how you keep people understanding that, yes, firearms can kill people, but treating someone like shit because they didn't know one of your unwritten rules, that's also not acceptable.
And look, man, just to tie it into current events, the McCloskeys in your video, look, Second Amendment folk, like, you're all treating these people like fucking, just assholes. How about this? How about, yes, like, did they do things that maybe I or you would do differently? Sure. Did their fucking house get destroyed and did they get killed? No. So how about instead of motherfucking them, we help them, right? Or anybody else. You're at the range and you see someone do something like, hey, dude, like, how you doing, man? Like, first time on the range, gonna help you out. Like, let me help you so we can get real, to your point, to help the Second Amendment stick around. Let's get people better. Let's get people more educated. In that way, we've got a better platform to stand on to say, look, yeah, there are a shit ton of guns around, but the vast majority of people are really well trained and educated and safe. And so we're going to take them because there's no need to.
Yeah, I feel for those people because, like, I've heard everything from, well, they're rich, fuck them, they're Democrats anyway, fuck them, and it's like, no, like, these are exactly the people that, are going to help us to keep our fucking Second Amendment, right? They were in a bad way. Yeah, maybe they did things the best they could. It's on them, right? But the truth is from here on out, like, if someone was to show them, if someone was to help them, they would be more willing, and they understand the importance of owning a gun now. These are the 100% the people we need, more than the people who are like, oh, fuck them because of these three.
Well, and I would argue that to the ends of the fucking earth. It's like, oh, you want to say fuck them because they're wealthy? Like, okay, like, what does that have to do with protecting your home? Like, oh, they're a Democrat? They may have a different political stance than I do, but they still took out their weapon to protect their home. So what does that have to do with anything? It's like,
how is that different than what you would do?
100%. They're just people trying to protect their home. And, I had a bunch of friends in the jiu-jitsu community that literally were like world-class, like ABCC guys that were like, hey man, police department in my city, I will teach you for free. Your academies at your police departments, we will help your officers get better with what will help control people, right? Like, learn how to control, learn how to do things for free just to get people better. And I think if the gun community were to do things like these guys, and just help them get better instead of motherfucking them, then we'd all be in a better, just across the board.
Yeah, I completely agree, man. Completely agree. All right, hey, we'll wrap it up from here. I'm John Shrek McPhee, the sheriff of Baghdad. Talking to my buddy Ken here, and we just kind of wanted to talk through, like, if you're a new student, kind of what to expect, and how maybe this differs from what you normally hear off the Instagram. Ken, I'll let you wrap this up, man. I'll give you the final say. What do you say?
Oh man, I appreciate it. Thanks for the time, man. This is fun. I hope people hear and really think about taking some classes, from you and just try to get educated, safe, and get better. I think, that we own firearms, man. We owe it to ourselves and our community to be really proficient shooters and safe, right? And
I agree.
I think I hope people take it to heart and join.
Thanks, man. Thanks. All right, Ken. I'll talk to you later, buddy.
All right, thanks, man. Appreciate you. Did that go okay? It was my first ever time doing it, dude.